Hello and welcome back to E3 Energy and Efficiency with Emily. I'm your host, Emily Mottram, and today we're going to talk to one of our homeowners who lives in a high performance house. So I'd like to introduce you to Howie Berger. Thanks for coming on today, Howie.
Thank you.
Give us a little bit of why you moved to Maine, or a little background about you and your wife and what started this process.
Sure. We lived in Connecticut in a very modern house, and we moved to Maine to be closer to our family, which included our granddaughter. And in doing so, we decided that one of the things that we wanted to do was to build a house after looking at the housing inventory at the price point that we could afford on coastal Maine, and decided that rather than buy a 20-year-old house for which we were going to spend a lot of time and effort fixing up, we thought it was better to start from scratch and build something and try to come up with a way to build something that would fit the vision we had for the end environment that we wanted to live in. And in doing so, we wanted to build a modern house that in turn would have significant energy efficiency components built into it. It seemed like it was good for the environment, and it fit the approach of what we were trying to achieve.
What were some of the biggest takeaways that you had from, from both building a house and your experience with a high performance house versus, a standard house? What was the biggest thing that you learned through the process?
Well, one of the things that we learned right off the bat was when we went looking for a house, we decided that rather than just build something that was standalone in the woods, we were looking for a way to live in an area with people who might have similar values to what we had. And there was a subdivision being built in Freeport of very kind of with strict building code or laws that were put forth by the developer to build eco-friendly home.
Yep.
And that had a lot of appeal to us. So we decided that rather than look at different lots in different places, we would focus on this eco-friendly development. In doing so, one of the first things we saw was that we wanted a house that did not look the same as the other houses in the area. And therefore, to do this implementation, we knew that we would need additional expertise than what we could get by just talking to a builder or by going back and saying, oh, we saw a design in a magazine and gee, we should do that.
Yeah. So I think that was sort of what led you to me and this idea that we had about creating semi-customizable plans that then could be worked and modified from in the future. We created it with the energy aspects that were required here in this neighborhood that you built in, but also just from our personal experience. And so, we did that with you from scratch. So this was a custom design when we put it together for you. And so there were added challenges and complexities to you then not being able to see maybe what it might look like or feel like until it was built.
Yeah, and so where it leaves you is that the process of being able to visualize something in your head that you really can't see and walk through ups the kind of trust you need in the person who's doing the design, because it's all theoretical. What do you think? And you don't know until it's actually evolving. And so it's one thing to assemble the materials. It's one thing to get components. It's a totally different game if you really want to take the largest investment you're probably going to make and have it done right. You need a very strong advocate who can go and say, this is what I've perceived the issue to be. This is how it should be done. And stand up for the fact that your home construction has to be done correctly. You can't take a shortcut. You can't basically trade the environment for something else. And when you look at the level of building a regular home versus, in this case, an environmentally efficient home, if you do not take into account Emily's earlier word of complexity, you wind up in a position where you could just be doing something that would have many, many pitfalls. And the architect who's being your advocate is really doing the job of protecting you and your investment from running into those situations. And the point of fact, just to go after that, or to enhance that, is that the architect truly has a level of understanding and expertise you need, and builders in Maine are in reality not licensed.
Yeah.
So you need to find that blend to make it work.
Yeah, and I think, in this case, me as the architect and also as the building scientist behind it, is when you're building these high performance houses, they're really complex structures that go together, and sort of simple things that would maybe be standard construction in Maine are completely different in an eco-friendly home. And you as the homeowner aren't necessarily going to know that. And so it's really important for you to have somebody on your side and on your team, whether it's the architect and building scientist in my case, or whether it's an energy efficiency expert that maybe you hire on a consultant during construction, or whether it's a design build team and maybe somebody, part of the contractor's team, is your advocate that helps you to understand all of the different parts and pieces. I remember one thing that sort of stuck out to me during construction was we had talked about having a slab on grade house, and you knew that meant you didn't have a basement. But beyond that, I don't know that you're understanding until you saw them digging a hole, and you didn't know exactly what that meant. And so it's always this kind of level of having somebody that's there that is your advocate, that helps you to understand every part and piece of the design process and the house process.
And I think that the way to kind of put those pieces together is you may know aesthetically what you want.
Yeah.
You may also know from a layout standpoint what size and how you might want to use the rooms. What the typical person who's doing this may not understand is how the different systems work together, why one window is better than another. How are we going to circulate air in what we just built?
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to keep the air we just circulated fresh so that we're not living in a sealed container? How are we going to do the lighting so that we've been respectful of not using a lot of energy, but in turn, we've provided a level of light that people need to be able to do the different functional tasks they want. All these pieces just make the process more and more interesting. And besides being more and more interesting, makes the job of the basically partner / architect more valuable to, once again, go back and help you protect what you're doing, because sometimes the value of environmental homes is not as obvious, and people think they're just an equivalent to what we've done when we've built a regular home. But the money spent and the effort put into it is really helping the people who live there, is providing hopefully a healthier environment for them to live in, and also contributing back to doing something which is good for the overall community.
Yeah, I think we often get into talks about what is the added value, because unfortunately, some of the energy aspects are not the things that you get to see. I would say that windows can definitely be one of the pretty aspects, and we spend a lot of time personally trying to figure out how to connect you with the environment that's then outside your house. But at the same time, you work in your house, so we also want to think about the glare and excess light that's in your space, or the excess heat, and how you're going to be affected by that. Or our sunshades that created really fun patterns on the floors.
Sure.
So all of those different aspects that are part of it that are beyond just the standard 4 walls and a roof that hopefully doesn't leak.
Yeah, and I would say that if I was looking to just bring this to conclusion and just hit on the key points, one is, if you can find a house that fits your needs, that you can look at and modify, then the process will be simpler. There'll be less dependence on pure visualization,
Yep.
which does not necessarily mean it's less dependent on the architect, because you still have to get what you believe your vision is across to someone else and make sure that your vision is represented back to you the way you want in the final product. And so therefore it's an intriguing process to go through. It can be extremely enjoyable, and the level of stress and concern can be minimized, providing that you've put a team in place to help you understand, and not necessarily eliminate, but help you understand how to make a decision, and what the effect of your decision is going to be, rather than just going back and believing that you have enough expertise to do something and it won't have any downstream effect.
Yeah, I think I was listening to a podcast actually on the way here, and they were talking about systems thinking, where you can't just sort of make one change without realizing that it's part of a system and could have an effect on all of the rest of the structure or the house or the performance or the daylighting or shading or whatever it is that you may change. Might seem like a simple change at the time, but can have a big impact on something else.
Yeah, and so from a consumer standpoint, can't thank you enough for all you've done to help us achieve something that we're happy to live in, and also something we're proud to be part of the overall community.
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about that a little bit. Is what's been your experience living in the high performance home? So you moved in end of May, early June of 2018. So you've been in the house for about a year. And what are some of the things that are different either about living in a high performance home or the takeout that you got from now that you've been here and been sort of operating the system?
The first difference I think that we saw was that the HVAC system is totally different than anything we were used to. We were very used to either an oil burner or some gas-fired burner coming on, and then pushing a lot of air at different temperatures through the house.
Yeah.
That would have been our typical experience.
Yeah.
And in this house, it's very quiet, and it's very even. And so the HVAC system is sitting here, and it's kind of constantly monitoring, trying not to let very wide fluctuations of temperature take place, which is really different than an on-demand hot air system.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two, it's amazingly quiet. It takes a thunderstorm to make you know that something's going on outside. It's true. That part is really amazing. And three, on a hot day, because of the level of insulation that's in the house, it's never hot. You're never sitting here going, oh man, I better turn the air conditioning down. That same theory that tried to work in the winter to keep you warm is really doing a phenomenal job in the summer. And so you find out that one of the reasons we moved here, as we said, was our family, is that this becomes a haven for them in the summer, because instead of using their window air conditioners, they come here because of the basically dual function.
The thermal comfort level of living in the high performance house. Yeah, they do say that if it gets hot inside, it can stay hot inside, but it never really gets hot inside.
Yeah, I mean, and that's been very interesting to deal with. And the other part is there's, I think, going to be 15 houses in this neighborhood, 10 of which are built. And if you talk to the different people, which I think is really significant, because it's nice not to be an island, you get their different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of what we've said in here about visualization, complexity of systems, looking for ways to do it right the first time, understanding the process. When you talk to the different people, you get a lot of reinforcement as to why advocating or knowledge up front to do it correctly is the right thing to do.
And taking the time, as an architect, of course, we always express this, but taking the time sort of in the design phase to go through all of those things and the aspects and changing it so that in theory it would cost you less during construction to then not continually be fixing it or making changes on the fly to get what you had hoped to achieve.
Yeah, and the word you don't want to hear during the construction process is change order. It's not the word you want to hear. And everybody sets a budget and everybody tries to believe they make the budget. And then the reality is, how much are you going to go over the budget? And one of the things to help prevent that is what you're saying is to go back, talk, understand, design, review, take all the steps that you can take. And if you do that, then you should be able to keep any change order to a minimum. It should really be something that you just, couldn't foresee, or it was some bizarre site condition. But you really want to minimize that because it's the change order that probably has the most level of stress for the home, buyer in this case. And again, the job of the advocate, the job of the architect, the overall concept is to really be there to minimize that and to provide you with the highest quality for what you've agreed to, so that your experience at the end of the day of doing this process, which in turn is expensive, is done correctly.
Yeah, I always love to say that this is probably the most expensive purchase that you're gonna make in your lifetime, especially if you're building versus buying a house, and that if it's going to be the most expensive thing that you do, why would you not spend a little bit of time and money to, like you said, make sure that you're doing the right things to achieve the goals that you want from the beginning versus after it's already constructed and realizing there's some kind of change. Or if we would have just oriented the house in a different direction, or placed this on the site 20 feet to the left. I mentioned in one of our previous podcasts that we had been out on the site, me as the architect and the builder and the excavation contractor and the homeowner, and you're out in your case, we were out in the middle of the woods. It's a completely wooded lot. It hasn't been cleared yet, and we're saying, okay, this is the orientation, this is where it's going to go, this is how it fits on the site. And I had another excavation contractor say, well, usually people just say, I want it over there somewhere. And in a high performance house, and specifically for the unique challenges for your site, is it really needed to go in a very specific spot to meet all the targets that we were going for here with the energy aspects and the triangle of the lot, and taking advantage of the sun and the solar from the south side. So that was kind of one of those fun and unique challenges that you don't want to find after the fact, that if the house was just 10 feet the other direction, it would have been perfect.
Well, and the one thing is that since everything, you can't get everything. And so one of the things we originally thought that we wanted when we looked at our list of, let's say, 10 things that we thought were most important to us, is we probably wanted solar panels.
Yeah.
And based on, as you just said, the restrictions of this lot, orienting the house in a certain direction, living to the requirements that, as mentioned earlier, that were part of the subdivision with setbacks and what you could build from a footprint. The one thing we had to trade was the idea that we would not get solar panels.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we at least were presented with enough information so that we could make that decision intelligently. But again, it's not that you get everything you ever asked for.
Right.
You have to be able to go back and be flexible enough to understand that there are many things you can get, but some things you just have to trade because it's just a function, as they said, of, in this case, how the site turned out.
How the site turned out. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it was an interesting experience. It would be interesting to do it again. My wife doesn't share that approach.
Wow, she doesn't want to build another house?
No.
So what would you have done differently? If you were going to build it again, what would you have done differently?
I probably would have gone and said that having spaces which had higher ceilings, building something that was a little more dramatic inside, might have been a guiding characteristic.
Yep.
Might have gone back and probably reoriented how one gets from one level to the other. Would have probably taken one look at the ultimate utilization of where to put mechanical equipment so that they were in their own flow of the house. But none of that would have basically changed the end result of what we got.
Yeah.
But they would have been had basically either money not been an object or certain design criteria not basically shown up. Those are things I think that we probably would have done differently. But in turn, they were decisions we made to be able to fit within the budget of what we had,
sure,
design what we wanted to do, and in turn provide a living environment that we felt comfortable in.
Yeah, and so we have a really dynamic exterior of this house. We could have had a more dynamic interior of this house. That was one of those things that sort of maybe got value engineered out during the design process again, because you say, if money was unlimited, what would you do? But it would be really interesting to know if you felt that during the design process, when this didn't exist on anything other than paper, could you have made those decisions? Or do you think now that it's built and you can walk through it and you can see it and you say, oh, wouldn't it be great if the ceiling was vaulted in this space? Do you find that being in the space now allows you to better understand the space?
Yeah, and the driving motivation is that you set in your head, which most people set a budget for what they can afford, and then leave themselves some room because they know it's not going to be perfect. And the challenge is not to set your base number so high that you have no flexibility whatsoever.
Right.
So we allocated an amount of money, we left ourselves some flexibility, and the design changes that we're talking about would have then pushed our budget higher than what it is we felt comfortable spending.
Yep.
And so then we said we can easily enjoy the house without those things. But I think as anything, there would have been nice to haves. They weren't necessary. What was more important, which has turned out to kind of been a hidden value here, is there was a need to have a supplemental heat source of a wood stove. Yep. And we were told that that's more of a challenge in a very tight house than it is in a house that breathes easily. Yeah. And so we found a wood stove that had its own air supply, in turn would then take nothing from the equilibrium of the air in the house and would be there to supplement in case there was a power failure in the winter, the heat. Also, it would give you some true aesthetic interest. And that turned out to be like a really wonderful thing. And for anyone considering building one of these eco-friendly houses, I would highly suggest putting a wood stove of some type in that for the dollars spent and the reward that came with it was clearly a much higher payback.
Yeah,
than the cost.
And I think one of the things that we didn't really touch on was thermal comfort is this idea, but it's different for everyone. Some people like to be warmer, some people like to be cooler, and the house doesn't really fluctuate or change in temperature. But when you're here in Maine and it's negative 15 degrees outside, yep, even if it's still 65 or 70 degrees inside, you almost want that wood stove. Maybe it's something about Maine, maybe it's something about that time of year where you just need that excess, but there's something that's really comfortable about having that wood stove that says, okay, we need this extra heat today. Or
three pieces of wood, because it's a European wood stove, so that takes standard logs, but they have to go vertically, not horizontally, which is a whole different challenge to load up a wood stove. Was worth about 6 degrees
Yeah.
of temperature without the heat.
Without the heat.
You could knock the temperature in the house up about 6 degrees, 5 to 6 degrees, by using 3 logs, which was an amazing, hats off to the efficiency, of that particular design.
Yeah, and they do say that it's like 5 to 6 degrees is a person's comfort level, and so that extra 6 degrees was worth all of it.
You could be wearing a t-shirt in here in the winter when you put the wood stove on, because it definitely did its job.
It definitely did its job.
It was great.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that you want to impart to somebody who might be considering either building a regular house that you would push them towards considering a high performance house, or somebody that's trying to build a high performance house?
I would say that if you took the hybrid approach to what we had, and you could find an existing, if more people build eco-friendly houses and there are more eco-friendly subdivisions, then the inventory of homes to look at, to evaluate if that style would work for you, and then you could modify it to possibly make it a little more personal to the taste you want, would really almost be an ideal scenario for how to approach home construction. As long as you went in with the idea that to make those changes or to achieve what you want, that you had put the proper team together, so that you had the advocacy, as we spoke about at great length at the beginning of this, in place, so you were not making seat of the pants decisions with no expertise. And that experience of being able to see something and modify it from either an existing set of plan sets, from an existing house you could go visit, work that someone had shown you. The idea of seeing other people's work for something you're going to purchase definitely was a valuable and very valuable and defensive, if you will, position, because you had a better idea for what the deliverable was going to be.
Yeah.
And so in conclusion, for me, it was an interesting experience. We're happy with the end result. And as the broken record, without Emily's input and expertise, we could easily assume that we would not have achieved this end result. So Emily, thank you very much for all you've done.
Thank you, Howie. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, and it was a pleasure working with you and your wife as we built this house, and all of the expertise that you imparted to us so that we learn and grow and can change. I learn something new on every house that I build, so it's always fun. So I appreciate you coming on today. And last, I just want to give everybody an update. On July 10th in Topsom, not in Thomaston, in Topsom, we're going to be doing a building and living sustainable panel. Homeowners and experts, anybody who wants to come and ask questions about sustainable community, healthy homes, organic landscaping, permaculture, come join us at 2 Main Street in Topsom on July 10th from 5:30 to 7:30. There's going to be food and drinks, an open forum. So basically you get to come and ask questions. So if you have more questions about high performance homes or sustainable communities, come on out. It's put on by Douglas Ridge. So they are going to be formulating this panel with landscape architect Carrie Lewis, myself, Mike Maines, an energy specialist, and a permaculture designer, David Homa. So if you'd like to come out and ask more questions, there's also going to be a chance to win a couple of free solar panels from Douglas Ridge. So that's, again, building and living sustainable, 2 Main Street in Topsom on July 10th from 5:30 to 7:30. So thanks for joining us today, and have a great day.